the manner in which the protests are being handled, so that, you know, gunshots, live rounds were fired. Some people will argue that that cannot be the way to handle, you know, a civil protest or a protest by people who are not armed.
When you said a civil protest, the protest had become anything but civil. Anything but civil. You saw what happened at the National Assembly on July 9. They stormed that place, set so many cars ablaze. A policeman was killed. So it's anything but civil. And then last week, the police said all protests in Abuja had been restricted to the Unity Fountain. So if they wanted a civil, peaceful protest, they would do it at the prescribed place. Granted that under democracy, you have the right to protest. Democracy recognizes civil protest. But when a protest also has the tendency to lead to loss of lives, lead to mayhem, then it must be curtailed. So if the shared members wanted a peaceful protest, and they are religious people, have not known any religion to preach mayhem and death. So if they wanted a peaceful protest, they could have restricted themselves to the prescribed place. They will still make their point.
The live rounds.
The live rounds. I'm not a security agency. I'm not a policeman. Maybe the police spokesman will speak about that. But one thing you agree is that till now, the police had used minimum force. Minimum force. Because they could have started using those live rounds from day one. And this has persisted for months, for many, many months. But they had used minimum force to try to curtail it.
Mm. Are they supposed to be using live bullets at this time? I was guaranteed that this won't happen when there's another protest.
Yeah, I think I answered that earlier. When this thing started, you know, it has lasted for months, if not more than a year. They have protested regularly in Abuja. They were doing it peacefully. And so there was no forceful response to those protests. The police will even stand with them as they protested. But when it took a violent turn, they went to the National Assembly, burnt vehicles, killed the policeman, and generally unleashed murder and mayhem on society. The police couldn't just watch. They would then need to escalate their response to it. You would agree that till now it had been minimum force that police used. But the protest went violent. So the police need to also escalate their response to it, because it is the duty of police and other security agencies to ensure that lives and properties are protected. So if anybody or any group wants to rupture the peace in a way that will lead to loss of lives, there would then be adequate response.
I mean, yes, the police have to do their jobs, but the question is, should they be using live bullets? I mean, what we see everywhere else is either used
you are repeating. You are repeating the question.
No, you're saying that they have to do. But the question is, must they use live bullets? That's the question.
I told you that the police will respond according to the level and the decibel of the threat. When there was no violence, there was no killing, there was no arson, did they use live bullets? They did it. But when they began to kill and burn and threaten lives generally, the police have to respond appropriately. But it will not be in my place to offer explanation on that. The police is positioned to defend itself on that matter.
Okay, Mr. Adeshina, now what you're saying now sort of reminds me what Mr. Garba Shehu said on Sunday. Now, he was asked to respond to the rising protests and the possibility of this turning violent. And I'd like to read to you what he said. It was on Channels Television. Now, this is what he said, and I quote. He says, "Those guys are not intelligent. If they had read our statement correctly, they would have seen an olive branch." He went on to say, these guys need to think and determine what is right for themselves. If the government were to use force, it is present. but by the decision of the president, we don't push too hard, and they shouldn't push the government to the wall. Now you're saying that the security forces will rise to the decibel. Mr. Garba made the statement. I mean, what you said sounds similar. So the question is, again, what is the thinking of the presidency about this group? I mean, don't you think this could have been handled better?
I think it has been handled well so far, till we had that violent turn of events. It had been handled well so far. Many times I've seen them protesting with the police also forming a barricade to ensure that they do not go beyond certain points. But when they began to break into National Assembly, they began to burn vehicles, they began to kill policemen. No, you don't expect that the police will not scale up their response.